In week 1, the New Orleans Saints proved who they could be. In week 2, the Saints have to prove who they be, or something like that. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as the Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net and Saints analyst with WWL TV. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're taking a look at the Dallas Cowboys, starting to turn our attention for the Saints ahead to week 2. We're going to discuss the challenge that the New Orleans Saints defense presents and will face, including what will be the most important unit for the New Orleans Saints defense. We're going to dive into how both of these teams are trying to prove who they are, but we're going to kick everything off with the New Orleans Saints offense, who of course is off to prove it this upcoming week. We appreciate you very much as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day, and for being an everydayer here on the Locked On Saints podcast, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube or YouTube TV in return. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started with America's #1 sportsbook. So the New Orleans Saints absolutely blew the doors off of the Carolina Panthers. Can they find a way to do the same thing against the Dallas Cowboys? Boy, well, that sure would be such a showing, but that seems unlikely, right? Doesn't seem likely that the New Orleans Saints will walk into Dallas, Jerry World, AT&T Stadium, and beat the Dallas Cowboys 47-10 after they just had a blowout victory of their own, scoring more than 30 points up against what was supposed to be one of the NFL's best defenses in the Cleveland Browns. And so now the New Orleans Saints are really set to try to prove themselves here in this matchup, whether it's because of what they can do on the offensive side, whether it's because of what they do on the defensive side, whatever it might be. That's how they got to win the game. But what they're looking to prove is that this offense was not just a one-shot, one-hit wonder type of a situation. They've got to prove that they're going to walk in to every game and have impose the threat of that offense every week. Even if it's not exactly that offense every week, which is illogical, it's got to at least pose that threat. So how do the New Orleans Saints do that? Well, the first thing is that you have to continue to play to Derek Carr's strengths. We highlighted in yesterday's episode the way that first opening drive by Klint Kubiak highlighted the playmakers, got Alvin Kamara out in space, gave the ball to Taysom Hill with a full head of steam, got Alvin Kamara out in the passing game, attacked deep with Derek Carr off of, utilizing play action, and then attacking deep rather with Derek Carr to Rashid Shaheed. No play action on the Rashid Shaheed play as it was a 3rd and 4, but still play action at an earlier point in the drive. And so elevating all of those things where you're working to everyone's strengths has to be the #1 priority. And one of the ways that you do that is you continue to put Derek Carr in advantageous situations. The Saints took Derek Carr from a 14.8% dropback percentage of play action in 2023 into a 40% dropback percentage of play action on Sunday against the Carolina Panthers. We highlighted that along with motion numbers in yesterday's episode, but I'm bringing it up again because it's an example of how Klint Kubiak played to Derek Carr's strength. The other thing that helped play to Derek Carr's strength was the usage of motion. The Saints jumping up to the top of the NFL in motion usage at over 66%. How does that help Derek Carr? Well, before the snap, it gives him something that he can use for his diagnostic in terms of understanding what the defense is showing pre-snap. After the snap, it forces the defense to wait and figure out exactly what's going on, especially when you snap the ball while a player is still in motion before they're able to attack, and it buys extra time. So what did we just highlight? Play action, working to Derek Carr's strength. Motion, pre-snap, diagnosis, working to Derek Carr's strength. Holding up the defense because they're waiting to see how a play unfolds because of all the motion at the snap, buying Derek Carr time, therefore allowing him to play to his strengths and being able to get the football out and be able to have the time, not necessarily have any quick pressure. The New Orleans Saints allowed 132 quick pressures last year. Quick pressures typically defined as those pressures that are there in, I believe it's less than 2.5 seconds, might be less than 3 seconds, but typically less than 2.5 seconds, depending upon whose metrics you're looking at. Saints led the NFL in that metric. The Saints week one such pressure that they surrendered. I know it was the Carolina Panthers. I get it. But look, they played the Carolina Panthers twice last year and still gave up 132 of them things over the course of the entire season. Okay. So no matter what, much improved in that area for New Orleans. And a big part of how you avoid giving up quick pressure is not letting anybody, come off the edge untouched, of course. But the other side of that, on the offensive side, is make the defense wait to see what you're doing. Make them adjust, make them calibrate, make them read, challenge their eyes, stall them. And that's what motion at the snap, when a player is still in motion when you snap the football, helps you do. So lots of ways for you to be able to kind of help to curb a little bit of that and help your quarterback have the time that he needs to be able to scan the field, read, and then make the plays that he needs to make in the passing game. Even when it came down to time to throw for Derek Carr in week one, 2.76 seconds. So the ball was coming out quickly during all throughout that game against the Carolina Panthers. Not super far off from his 2.57 seconds last year, but better than where the Saints were at the beginning of the season. Week one last year, 2.89 seconds. So a whole 1/10 of a second the Saints were able to shave off of that week one total here in 2024. So I think that that's a big thing. The other thing that you're looking for is what I mentioned earlier about putting your players in position to make plays, right? The Saints did a really good job of keeping their playmakers on the field, played a lot of their game in 11 personnel, but also played a ton of their game with 2 tight ends on the field. Foster Morrow, Juwan Johnson, Taysom Hill, being able to utilize those guys. Maybe Dallin Holker's back this week. We'll see. Just gives you all the opportunity to continue to have talent on the field and maximize that talent by using them to their strengths. And remember, the Saints did what they did last week without ever really getting much going with Chris Olave, because Carolina was so focused on triple covering Chris Olave all throughout the game that it opened up opportunities elsewhere all over the field. And so with situations like that, you now walk into this one to where, there's a very talented set of defensive backs in Dallas. And so they might feel a little bit more froggy and decide to leap one-on-one when it comes to Chris Olave. Can Chris Olave win those matchups and then be a factor this week in a way that he wasn't able to be a factor last week? And then all of a sudden, there's a whole new area of your offense. The last piece is starting to unveil more in the offense. My understanding is that the Saints showed a little bit of what they had to offer, but not a ton of what they had to offer from this offense in that week one matchup. A lot of the same plays over and over again against Carolina, going back to certain things, certain looks, all that. There's a lot of things that New Orleans still has left in its back pocket. And I think that these 2 games against the Dallas Cowboys and then the week 3 matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles will start to bring some of that extra stuff out. So excited to see how Klint Kubiak ends up getting stuff done. The thing that they have to protect against here is going to be the pressure. The Dallas Cowboys, phenomenal in pressure in 2023 last year. They were one of the top, actually they were the top team in pressure percentage last year with 42.5%, which is actually one of the highest numbers in the last 6 seasons, according to Next Gen Stats. And that did not slow down for them last week up against the Cleveland Browns. Micah Parsons with 9 pressures, DeMarcus Lawrence with 8 pressures, and then Marshawn Nealon with 6 pressures. That is a total that is already above what the New Orleans Saints did as a team up against the Carolina Panthers with 22 pressures. So it's going to be tough sledding for the New Orleans Saints if they can't keep that pass rush at bay at least a little bit for the Dallas Cowboys and for their quarterback in Derek Carr. Look, Micah Parsons is going to get his. It's all about minimizing the effect and impact that he has, right? He can get his, but don't let him get 3. He can get his, but don't let him hurt your quarterback. He can get his, but don't let him force the ball out of that quarterback's hands, all those other things. So Saints are going to have a big test here up against the Dallas Cowboys, who, just like the New Orleans Saints, are off to prove that they themselves are not a mirage. How the New Orleans Saints and Dallas Cowboys kind of are walking the same line this week against one another. We're going to be breaking that down next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The New Orleans Saints heavy road dogs in this game right now, plus 6.5 going against the New Orleans Saints up against the Dallas Cowboys. Now, they are on the road. Typically, what they say is that you give 3 points in favor of the home team. So you could look at the New Orleans Saints as 3.5, but for your betting perspective, 6.5, pretty good line there. You think the Saints really will lose by a touchdown in this game? Otherwise a blowout? Or do you think the Saints could actually keep it close? Maybe taking at least the spread might be a good idea in this one. And right now, if you want to get in on that, FanDuel is the place to go. And especially right now, because now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers will get who put $5 down will get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with your YouTube TV base plan, you're going to be able to watch every regular season out of market afternoon football game. All that you need is a Google account, a current form of payment, and then you can cancel any time. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, family. The New Orleans Saints and Dallas Cowboys are both on a journey to prove who they really are in this matchup. Who will come out on top? And I'll tell you why the New Orleans Saints might be uniquely positioned here just a little bit. We appreciate you very much as always. Make it Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, don't forget to go and check out Locked On NFL, new and improved, the Madman Tyler Rowland, and the Barbershop with Tony Wiggins. These guys giving you a double daily dose of NFL content with the help of the local experts. So make sure that they actually know what they're talking about. Imagine that. National show with local insight on local teams and stories. Who'd have thunk? Turns out it was a good idea. Go and check it out today. Fantastic show over at Locked On NFL, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So I think the New Orleans Saints might actually be uniquely positioned this week to be in a little bit of the better position than the Dallas Cowboys in terms of proving that they weren't a mirage. I think that a part of that becomes of where the bar is, right? The New Orleans Saints, the bar is be an excellent defensive team with a functioning, competent offense. That's kind of what the bar is. Now, last week, the New Orleans Saints ended up being number 8 in the NFL when it came to explosive play percentage. So not only did they prove that they could be an effective and adequate offense, they proved they could be an explosive offense, a creative offense, an innovative offense. Maintaining that same standard that they set in week 1 through the next 16 contests, 17 weeks, is not going to be realistic. But can they do enough of it to still put themselves in position to compete in games and, more importantly, win games? The New Orleans Saints were competitive in some games. There were 3 and 6 in close matchups, however. So even though they were competitive, they didn't win those close matchups. Not at a rate that's high enough to celebrate at this point. And so I think that becomes a really important thing for New Orleans, is to be able to show, hey, not only can they win the blowouts, not only can they beat up on the bad teams, but they can also win the close games. They can gut one out and do what they need to do. That could be this situation against the Dallas Cowboys. On the other hand, the Dallas Cowboys, the expectations are already sky high, right? They're in a very competitive NFC East that just got a little bit more competitive because turns out, who'd have thunk, Jaden Daniels is really good. And they're also already considered a top team in the NFC, along with the Philadelphia Eagles within the division. But then, of course, the San Francisco 49ers. I think you can throw the Los Angeles Rams, the Detroit Lions in that conversation as well. The Saints are not typically spoken of right now in that same conversation the way that the Dallas Cowboys are. And so therefore, the stakes are just a little bit higher, right? I think the standards are high on both sides, but I just think the expectations are different for the Dallas Cowboys, and that could set them up for a little bit of failure. The Saints could conceivably go into this game, look really good, and still lose, but still walk away with a little bit of a quote-unquote moral victory. You don't get moral victories as a favorite in a game. You can get a moral victory as an underdog, but you ain't getting moral victories when you're the favorite, when you're one of the top teams in the NFC, and when you're one of the most historied franchises in the entire NFL. Now, I think that any New Orleans Saints player or family member or anything like that just heard me say moral victory probably just gagged. And I get it. I understand that. No moral victories in the NFL. I'm with you. But I do think that there is a difference between sort of trying to prove whether or not you're a mirage, trying to prove whether or not you're true and real in terms of what you showed week one. This is kind of our calibration period to find out who these teams really are. And so sometimes, yeah, there are little moral victories in terms of all that. But I think that the Saints fans, I would rather see the Saints go out there and just simply win rather than walk away with a moral victory. But that's why I think that like the mirage conversation is so interesting, because the criteria to prove that you weren't a mirage is just very different for both of these teams. The other thing that I want to highlight here is that for Dallas, this game against the New Orleans Saints kind of can loom for them. And I've heard people in Dallas kind of talking about it as a little bit of a trap game. So the New Orleans Saints kind of get the fun of walking into an away stadium as the underdog with something to prove, like something more to prove. Not just, hey, the week one thing wasn't just a flash in the pan, but like they're in all genuine nature walking into this game as the underdog. And so that gives them a little bit extra motivation, a little bit more of that kind of, what do you call it, chalkboard material or whatever. And look, every NFL player should hit the field motivated. If you're looking the week before motivation, you're already behind the eight ball. But I think that the Saints kind of have a little bit of that attitude about them, a little bit of that chip on the shoulder about them, of being looked down on. It's part of what they're talking about in the building right now. Dennis Allen speaking a lot to the players about, hey, a lot of the people that were looking down on you a week ago or singing your praises right now, don't take the bait. They'll talk bad about you again. You know what I mean? And so like they're very much looking at this as not only a prove-it opportunity for themselves, but also an establishing of who they are and what their standard is. I think that the worst thing that the New Orleans Saints can do in this matchup is walk in and be worried about what the Dallas Cowboys are going to do across from them. The New Orleans Saints need to be able to walk into a game and say, this is who we are, and then execute that identity, that DNA, that foundation that is true to who they are. That is what the New Orleans Saints will need to do in this one. Once you start getting into a point where you're like, okay, well, they do this really well, so we should be doing this really well, you've lost the plot. You're now playing to their identity. And so for these two teams, I think a big part of what's going to be the deciding factor in this one, especially with the New Orleans Saints being the road game, we know what travels in the NFL, defense and the run game. That's what travels. If the Saints are able to control the tempo of this game and slow it down, they keep themselves in a much better position to win it. If they get into the, hyper fast, no huddle, Dallas controls the tempo type of a situation, not necessarily a shootout, but just simply Dallas controlling the tempo and them moving quickly, getting in and out, getting all this stuff, then all of a sudden the Saints might be stuck playing a little bit of catch up. And that's where you don't want to be, right? And so I think that that's something else that the New Orleans Saints have that they can actually operate in their favor. Because the one big thing that Dallas does, or one of the things that Dallas does really well over on the defensive side, is that they defend the run. And they defend the run very well. They're one of the top teams in the NFL when it comes to rushing efficiency and limiting the run. When you look at overall rushing efficiency, according to the NFL Pro and Next Gen Stats, the Saints are top 10 in the NFL right now when it comes to rushing efficiency. And if you look at where Dallas struggled in the run game last year, they were actually really good in the middle, but they were one of the bottom 7 teams or in the bottom 10 in the NFL when it came to stopping and limiting efficiency to the outside run game. So the New Orleans Saints' brand new scheme is perfectly matched to at least challenge what it is that Dallas has traditionally struggled against. So can the New Orleans Saints travel their run game? Can they travel their defense? If they do, then they will be in a situation to prove that they were not a mirage in week one. They don't have to have the big 59-yard deep balls. They don't have to have the big take the top off the defense types of completions. They just need to control this game. And if they can control it with their run game and their defense, it's just as good and proves just as much about them as what we're hoping to see from them after that fantastic week one performance. Coming up next, I want to take a look at the defensive side of the football. A lot of talk around the New Orleans Saints offense, but the defense has to show up for this one too, and they're going to be tested. I'm going to tell you who I think the most important group of players is for the New Orleans Saints, and it's not who you might think. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is the same one that will help you keep your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to be able to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts and accessories for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for at ebaymotors.com. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, you're going to be able to find exactly what you're looking for every time, and it's going to be guaranteed to fit your ride the first time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. So with all the parts that you need at the prices that you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home some huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive today at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply, and eBay Guaranteed Fit available only to U.S. customers. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. We appreciate you very much for being here for another episode of Locked On Saints. Before we go much further, I hope that you are safe. I hope that you are well as Hurricane Francine bears down. I'm getting all my stuff ready. I'm done my hurricane prep. I'm ready to hunker down and all that good stuff. This might impact our usual 2-a-day schedule over the course of the next few days and stuff like that. I hope that you're okay with that. I'll continue to bring you as much content as I can, even if it means recording and posting second episodes as opposed to going live. We'll see what happens with power outages, all that kind of stuff. So just know that might impact it, but I intend to be here with you the entire way through. And Thursday's episode's already pre-recorded, our crossover Thursday, so you'll at least have that to listen to as everything goes through. So hope that you are well, hope that you are safe. Please take care. God bless as we continue to move forward here. And of course, reach out. Thank you. All right, so the New Orleans Saints defense, the New Orleans Saints offense is not the only unit that's going to be tested in this game. I think the New Orleans Saints defense is going to be tested as well. And one particular unit might be their saving grace. Let me start here with why I think the New Orleans Saints defense will be tested. And it really comes down to two players. Well, three players technically, right? Dak Prescott's number one. But then his two guys, CeeDee Lamb and former New Orleans Saint, Brandon Cooks. So the Saints have played before in the past and have fared well against. But that, I think, is going to be what it is that you're going to see. And Brandon Cooks might be good for some deep touchdown or something like that, kind of the Jalen Guyton, Chris Godwin, DJ Moore flashes that you would see, to where like, all right, they're good for a touchdown and a deep pass, and somebody's going to get beat and it's fine. It's okay. And like, they'll figure it out and then still end up being okay on the defensive side. That might happen, right? We'll see how it all goes. But for the Saints, they've got to be able to key in on guys like CeeDee Lamb as well as Brandon Cooks. Now, we'll see what happens with Marshawn Lattimore, who has told reporters that he's fine. He spoke to us in the locker room after the game. He was standing on the sideline still after he left the game with a hamstring injury against the Carolina Panthers. So he should be okay. We'll see exactly what happens, though. Hamstring injuries can be tricky. The Saints could have to potentially turn to rookie Kool-Aid McKinstry, who I think they'd be perfectly comfortable turning to. And you would still have Paulson Adebo on the opposite side. Remember, the Saints don't shadow coverage. So somebody plays one side, somebody plays the other side. So they both get looks at the newly paid CeeDee Lamb. And so that's definitely something to keep an eye out on. But surprisingly for me, or maybe to you, but for me, that's not the most important part of the New Orleans Saints team on the defensive side for me in this game. And to take it a step further, I also don't think that it's the Dallas Cowboys' former NFC East mate in Chase Young and the New Orleans Saints pass rush. I think the most important area for the New Orleans Saints is the middle of the field and the middle of their defense. And to me, that all comes down to their second level, to their linebackers, Demario Davis, Pete Werner, and then potentially Willie Gay Jr. We'll see how he's dealing after leaving Sunday's game against the Carolina Panthers a little early. So here's why I think they're the most important part of all this. CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks. That's a manageable situation for the New Orleans Saints passing defense. CeeDee Lamb's going to have a good game. That's fine. It's kind of like the Michael Parsons situation. They're going to get theirs. That's okay. The thing that you can't do is let them learn or figure out a third option while your defense is up against them. And that's why I think that the second level becomes very important, because the two most likely places you're going to find that third option is going to be somebody that's playing low and close. So low in terms of in the middle of the field and things like that. Close isn't close to the line of scrimmage. and then the run game. And both of those areas are going to be big time focal points for the New Orleans Saints when it comes to their defense. Much unlike how the Dallas Cowboys struggled in terms of rushing efficiency, and the Saints might be able to take advantage of that by running to the outside. The Saints were number 2 in the NFL when it comes to rushing efficiency and have a major advantage over the Dallas Cowboys and Ezekiel Elliott. Remember, no more Tony Pollard over there. And Ezekiel Elliott when it comes to that run game, which was number 21 in rushing efficiency in week 1 against the Cleveland Browns. The Saints could continue their outstanding look. Now, I do think, or outstanding play against the run in this one. And that second level becomes really important. Now, I do think that even though you look at the Saints as the number 5 passing efficiency defense in the NFL versus the Dallas Cowboys, who are number 24 in passing efficiency on offense, I do think that that's because the Dallas Cowboys didn't have to open their playbook very much. They had, I believe, a defensive touchdown. They had a special teams touchdown. They were able to play on some short fields. The Cleveland Browns were just atrocious. And as I said, the Cleveland Browns fans are already calling for Jameis Winston. I said it was going to happen within 5 weeks. I didn't think it was going to happen in 1, but I did say it was going to happen within week 5. And we're already starting to see it over in Cleveland as more trouble stacks up for Deshaun Watson. And as, he continues to be horrible. So that's another piece of it too. But the Dallas Cowboys didn't have to open up much of that Mike McCarthy offense in this one. So because of that, I do think that there's something to watch here in terms of what Dallas has the potential to show New Orleans that they didn't show the Cleveland Browns, and vice versa, right? The Saints up against Mike Zimmer and that Dallas Cowboys defense is going to have a lot of exotic rush packages, blitz packages, pressure packages, and everything like that. It's going to make life hard for the New Orleans Saints passing game. And so what can they do in their run game to kind of take them by surprise and then kind of rear them back a little bit? So good things can happen for the New Orleans Saints here. The other thing that I do think is going to be important on the New Orleans Saints defense outside of that linebacker room, which I still think is going to be the most important because they're going to be the ones to make sure that there's no number 3 option for that Dallas Cowboys offense, is going to be Chase Young and that pass rush. That's kind of the next thing that I look at because you have all the confidence in the world in the New Orleans Saints secondary at this point. Will Harris looked great communicating, working with the defense, next to Tyrann Mathieu, all that. But the other thing that I think is going to be important is Dallas is going to be starting a rookie left tackle. So I think you're going to see a lot of Chase Young over there, a lot of Carl Granderson over there. And I think you'll also see some supplemental blitz packages from Dennis Allen that will probably come from that side, Dak Prescott's blind side over on the defensive right, offensive left. And that might mean more sacks for Alontae Taylor. That might mean more pressure for Demario Davis. That might mean more opportunities for Pete Werner and whoever the next healthy linebacker is, whether Willie Gay Jr. or somebody else. So I think that ends up piling things up as well. And also, again, reinforces how important that linebacker room is going to be for New Orleans in this week 2 matchup. So that's a big thing that I'm looking at when it comes to the New Orleans Saints over on the defensive side. I do think that they will be tested. I do think that they have a lot to prove, but I do think that in this game, a lot of the heart of this team on the defensive side will come from the literal heart of its defense, and that is that linebacker unit in the middle of the field at the second level. So we'll see how this one all pans out, but we'll dive even further into this one with Marcus Mosher over at Locked On Cowboys in tomorrow's Crossover Thursday episode. Until then, stay safe, take care of yourselves, you and yours, and of course, we'll see you again here soon on Locked On Saints. We appreciate you very much as always for being here, for making us your first listen of the day every day. You can check out Locked On Pelicans and Locked On LSU if you're looking for some more listening today while you're hunkering down and waiting for this whole thing to pass. And of course, we'll be back with you here soon. Thank you for making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.